Theorem 6.16. It states, if the diagonals of a parallelogram are perpendicular, then the parallelogram is a rhombus. So in the diagram, if quadrilateral ABCD is a parallelogram, and segment AC is perpendicular to segment BD, then ABCD is a rhombus. Theorem 6.17 states, if one diagonal of a parallelogram bisects a pair of opposite angles, then the parallelogram is a rhombus. So if, in the diagram, ABCD is a parallelogram, angle 1 is congruent to angle 2, and angle 3 is congruent to angle 4, then ABCD is a rhombus. Theorem 6.18 states, if the diagonals of a parallelogram are congruent, then the parallelogram is a rectangle. So if, in the diagram, ABCD is a parallelogram, and segment AC is perpendicular to segment BD, then ABCD is a rectangle. You can use theorems 6.16, 6.17, and 6.18 to classify parallelograms. Recall that if a parallelogram is both a rectangle and a rhombus, then it's a square. You need to check for the properties of both a rhombus and a rectangle. And here's a useful flowchart. First we consider, is it a parallelogram? If not, then it's a quadrilateral. If it is, we need to consider, are the diagonals perpendicular? Or does one diagonal bisect a pair of opposite angles? If either of those two are yes, then we consider, are the diagonals congruent? If so, it's a square. If not, it's a rhombus. If we move back up and ask the questions, are the diagonals perpendicular? Or does one diagonal bisect a pair of opposite angles? And the answers to both of those questions are no. Then we ask, are the diagonals congruent? If yes, it's a rectangle. If no, it's a parallelogram. So this flowchart could be used to analyze different quadrilaterals and to classify them. Problem 1, identifying special parallelograms. Can you conclude that the parallelogram is a rhombus, a rectangle, or a square? Explain. Well, first, diagram A. Consider the information given. And yes, a diagonal bisects two angles. So by theorem 6.17, this parallelogram is a rhombus. Diagram B. Consider the information shown. And yes, the diagonals are congruent. So by theorem 6.18, this parallelogram is a rectangle. The diagonals are perpendicular. So by theorem 6.16, it's a rhombus. Therefore, this parallelogram is a square. Your turn. Part A. A parallelogram has angle measures of 20, 160, 20, and 160. Can you conclude that it's a rhombus, a rectangle, or a square? Explain. And part B, a reasoning item. Suppose the diagonals of a quadrilateral bisect each other. Can you conclude that it's a rhombus, a rectangle, or a square? Explain.